This is how the Benko Gambit starts. Starts with d4, black plays knight to f6. White plays c4, grabbing space in the queen side of the board. And black doesn't like this move, so he immediately challenges white's center with the move c5, offering a pawn for free. Now we all know that if white captures this pawn, black can easily recapture back with the move e6 or e5. So white doesn't grab this pawn. Instead, white plays d5, pushes the pawn further in black's territory, grabbing more space and making the development of black's pieces a bit difficult. And now because this d5 pawn is strongly supported by this c4 pawn over here, so black decides to challenge the base of this pawn with the move b5. b5 immediately attacks c4, and this is called as the Benko Gambit, which has arisen in the Benoni defense. Now black first offered a pawn on c5, which white rejected, and now black offers another pawn on b5, and now white has two options. White can either capture this pawn or reject the pawn and play something else. So let's see what happens in both of these cases. So if white decides to accept this gambit with the move pawn takes pawn, then this version would be called as Benko Gambit half accepted. Why half accepted? Because one pawn has been accepted and now black offers another pawn at a6. Now if white captures this pawn as well, then it would be called as a Benko Gambit fully accepted version. And why exactly black is offering a pawn again? Well, the idea is after this pawn captures pawn, black can recapture white's pawn with a tempo by developing his bishop. So bishop captures pawn, and now this bishop has been developed on a very nice diagonal aiming towards white's king side. White continues the development with knight to c3, black plays g6 in order to fianchetto the bishop on the dark diagonal over here, and now e4 by white, strengthening the d5 pawn over here. And here most of the times you will see that black captures this light squared bishop over here. The idea is to make white lose his castling rights, but that's okay. You don't have to worry if you're playing against Benko Gambit with the white pieces, because white can simply push this g pawn on the g3 square, get his king over here and continue his development. Let's see how that can happen. Now black might play here d6 and form a very strong pawn chain over here, and white can now play g3, bishop to g7, fianchettoing the bishop as well as preparing to castle, and now king to g2, and see white's king is completely safe over here and white can now continue the development of his other pieces. Black will most likely castle, white will get the knight out to the f3 square, and now knight b to d7, just developing the queenside piece, a4 by white, queen to a5, rook to e1, activating the rook on this file, and now rook f to b8. And we see that the reason why black chose to play Benko Gambit, because he really wanted to have some strong activity on the queen side of the board. Now since black has semi-open files for both the rooks and the queen, he's hoping to get a lot of initiative and attacking chances in the game. But white really doesn't need to worry anything over here. White can simply continue his development with bishop to d2, and at this position white has a very good advantage in the game because it has won a pawn. And though black is looking for some counter activity on the queen side, but it's not gonna be easy to take advantage over here, because white has his own plans of counter attacking too. So for instance, if black decides to capture this free pawn, then that's definitely not working, because white can now play knight to b5, closing the b file for the rook as well as attacking the queen over here. And from here onwards, white has already taken the initiative in the game and is in the tremendous advantage position. Now let's go back a few moves. So we already saw that if white decides to capture this pawn, then it would be called as Benko Gambit half accepted, and after a6, if white captures this pawn as well, then it would be called as Benko Gambit fully accepted version. Now let's go back. What if white decides not to capture this pawn? So the most popular move that you will see white can play over here is knight to f3. White is simply focusing on his development and is not worried about this pawn. In case black decides to capture this pawn, then white can simply continue with knight to c3, providing first of all defense to this pawn because currently it was under attack, and then later it can play e4, strengthening the support for this pawn as well as opening up the diagonal for this bishop to capture this c4 pawn over here. So therefore, going back a few moves, so therefore black really isn't interested in capturing this pawn. So most of the time black will play b4, grabbing more space in white's territory as well as making difficult for this knight to develop on the c3 square. But well, in that case, white doesn't have to worry. White can simply develop his knight to the d2 square. Black will continue with g6 in order to fianchetto the bishop. And now e4 by white. White has a very strong chain of pawns in the center of the board. Black will continue with d6. Black has formed a very strong chain on the queen side of the board. And now bishop to d3, knight b2 d7, simply developing pieces a3 by white, challenging the extended pawn over here. So when you have a strong pawn chain and you want to get rid of that pawn chain, you either have to attack the base of the pawn chain or the head of the pawn chain. Since in this case it's very difficult to attack the base, that is why white plays a3 in order to attack the head of the pawn chain. Now since there doesn't make any sense for black to capture this pawn and give up the square on b4, so he will simply continue with his development. Bishop to g7, and now you can play pawn takes pawn, and now knight to b3, simply developing. a5, providing strength to this pawn, and now both players will simply castle. And here we have reached a position that both players have a balanced situation and an equal chances of winning the game. Like this video and subscribe to my channel if you learned something new today. And now don't leave because it's time for the question of the day. So here is today's challenge for you. White has an extra pawn over here and it is white's turn to play. So how can white win this game from here onwards? Tell me the winning moves in the comments box and I'll see you in the next video.